welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we are straight from the cinema, but you're not hearing it exactly straight from the cinema, but we have just seen Nosferatu.
Nosferatu. We will probably be referring to it and that in that tone throughout the
and
text.
that voice throughout the whole thing.
Yes, and it's
I need more wheezing.
We need more wheezing. And it's an interesting one because we have this kind of thing where when we go to the cinema, we just walk back to our cars without speaking.
With as little talk as we can do.
In complete silence. Except I think I kind of said, I thought that was great or something. And
I stayed completely silent.
You stayed completely silent. So it's going to be an interesting one, I think, off the bat.
It certainly is, I think, for the... so, I mean, this was a big, hype from when it was. This almost felt like it was almost fan-created. I feel like people saw Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
And then when he would perfectly... Because there were fan posters before there was any announcement or even shown interest from Robert Eggers doing Nosferatu. Except, obviously, William Dafoe was in the role of Nosferatu. But
yeah. Well, he was Count Orlok in someone else, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in I think... I forgot what the film exactly is.
Yeah.
But it was...
Was it
I think it was more...
Film?
It was a film about
like
the
a
film.
Bit better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what I noticed is it seems like the boys are back in town. Because we've got, obviously, The Invisible Man came out a few years ago. We got Nosferatu coming out now next week, the 17th of January in the UK. We've got The Wolfman coming out, which just seems to have dropped out of nowhere. We are going to do a review of that, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave us a review so you can get it released as soon as it comes out. I will visit you in your dreams and remind you to subscribe, and I will hang dong in your dreams. I don't think we necessarily need to kind of go through the whole thing. And
no, we won't. We were considering back and forth between whether do we do a spoiler review even though we're not a spoiler-free review even though we're not in time of the release. Sadly, we couldn't quite get it right in there.
No, that's what she said.
So we were back and forth. That's one of our behind-the-scene kind of. We're always back and forth as to whether we're going to be, doing a little sneaky one or whether we're going to do the double. But this. Didn't feel appropriate because it's been out in almost 2 weeks in America. We only got it. So for us in the UK here, by the way, this will be, this is the first week horror of 2025. Yes. And this is I think my first new horror of 2025, as it's only 9 days in.
Yes.
So, but for people in America, that would have been your last horror of 2024. So it may have made it onto people's best of 2024 lists instead of... This would be a possibility for people's best of 25 in the UK.
Yeah, interesting way of doing it. Only a week apart as well,
or
so. I mean, we are going to be doing kind of full spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film yet, there's a couple of options. You can go and watch. You can obviously go and watch the film and then come back and listen to it. It's really weird because we've done the original Nosferatu and we did Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. So you can go and listen to those episodes as well for some reason, and not to be confused with the 1920s whatever Nosferatu. We are doing the 2024/2025 one.
Yeah.
There might be somebody out there going, these lads have already done this film. Kind of.
Yes. Well, we've done the silent film. We've done the 1922 F.W. Murnau's original with Max Schreck. Of that original one, which I was a big fan of.
I liked it as well. Cool.
The original, I thought, for a silent film, still allowed itself to be quite creepy, and the way that Nosferatu is shown in that kind of film, obviously being that it's Dracula, yes, it's Dracula, but they didn't actually have the rights to Dracula, so it's kind of the most well-known knockoff of all time, like the most well-renowned possibly knockoff of, we didn't have the rights, so it's Dracula, but we're going to call him this.
No, call him something else.
That should be that character, but he's not exactly this character, and this film follows that same, in some ways, kind of, it's not... and it's not Van Helsing. They've got different named, even though a lot of the publicity said, "Oh, this character's playing this person and this person." They're not that person. As in, we've got Thomas Hutter instead of Jonathan Harker.
And there were points where I had to say to myself, like, "Oh, John," I'd be like, "Oh, Nicholas Hoult, that's an interesting cast for Jonathan Harker." And then I'd like, "No, it's not." And then I'd be like, remind yourself that these are different characters.
Yeah. Because there was loads of stuff where it said, "Oh, the first look at like William Dafoe as Van Helsing in Nosferatu." It's like, no, he's Professor Alban Erbart von France, or Van Helsing. You know what I mean?
I don't know what we're going to refer them to, actors' names or the whatever. I think the names are going to jump around.
Yeah, it most likely will jump around a little bit, but probably the actors' names, to be honest, because I was very close to calling him Jonathan Harker, to be honest, so like for Nicholas Hoult. So it's going to jump around, I think, in that way. But yeah, so the original Nosferatu obviously has some major bearing in this film, although at the same time I also although yes, it is Dracula and the basic structure is still kind of somewhat there.
Yeah, it's quite there from the book,
but it's not, this film still does deviate from obviously that, and it deviates from previous adaptations in its own way, although I oddly found that this still felt in many ways very inspired by like Francis Ford Coppola's. I felt
it's really
more than I expected. I was expecting a little bit more fresher take than maybe I saw with this film.
I kind of found myself watching it, and particularly the part where I was about to say Jonathan Harker goes to the castle, and I found myself kind of thinking it's really, well, what I found interesting is you have the source material, and then you just have these directors who are obviously completely different directors, and not just in the same decade, like 30 years apart. But I found that the Francis Ford Coppola version was a lot more focusing. I mean, they all have kind of that gothic backdrop, but he lent more into the melodrama, more into the kind of the romance
angle,
and went that way. Whereas I felt like Bobby Eggs went, I'm just going to call him that, did go in a lot more into the horror and into the kind of the creature and the kind of the slow creeping dread of the film. Like, I felt a lot of the times I'd be, particularly in the castle and in the second half, where they do get to, I was about to say London, but they get to Bisping or whatever it is, the city. I found myself comparing how they showed those areas, how they showed Dracula's arrival, and how the deviation happened. Because it's almost up until that point, they do tread the same path quite closely.
It's once it gets to see, that's when the deviations mainly come. And again, that links back to the original Nosferatu, where it's very much as a creature. There's none of the romance. There's the idea of the creature going after Lily Rose depths. I'm blanking on
Ellie?
what her actually
Helen?
I think it's Ellen was what I was going to go with,
maybe.
but it's Ellen Hutter.
So
Lily Rose Depp's character, like that kind of infatuation is somewhat put into the film, but not as massive, but obviously is because she plays a larger role than I think you've ever had that meet a character play in any of the other versions kind of thing. They always seem to cast an American or Canadian, French Canadian or whatever she is as this character, instead of just going with a British actress who could do it.
Well, or German in this case.
German? Who's German?
It's set
it's set in Germany. Yeah. So we've got English-speaking Germans.
English-speaking Germans
as
with
they
American accents.
All along.
I think I'm trying to, because I don't want to go through each individual bit like we usually do sometimes. I mean, maybe we start with talking about some of the cast, because I think there was, William Dafoe absolutely fucks. I'm yet to see a film where William Dafoe doesn't.
That's the thing. It William Dafoe comes onto the screen, and it definitely brightens it up a bit for me. He always adds an interesting element to it. We haven't got. I'm not gonna lie. We haven't got the Lighthouse level of energy here. I expected him to be a little bit madder than he actually is. That was my only thing.
I
was expecting more. I was expecting a little bit more of that, because I still think that this film has a very hammy acting style quite across the board.
I think it does do a bit. It does do a bit of ham, but I don't think it's quite the full hog roast of the Francis Ford Coppola one. You know?
No, I mean, Francis Ford Coppola has his certain level of, hamminess as well, and he's not quite Anthony Hopkins level of thing, although Anthony Hopkins was probably my favourite character in that film. So William Dafoe doing it then made me think that William Dafoe, to be honest, after seeing his performance in The Lighthouse, was going to go full on. Yeah. We're going to get full on mad William Dafoe here, but he's more subdued than I expected. A little bit more, yeah. Yeah, he's a bit more standard Dafoe than I was expecting to be more delved into this different character he's created, but it kind of I enjoyed it because it's William Dafoe, but I enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like he was doing anything that was flexing.
I thought he was flexing. I thought but mainly in the dialogue that he had. I thought that the dialogue
some of the dialogue for him was incredibly. He had some of the best dialogue.
He had some of the best.
Then again, so does Van Helsing and other things.
Yeah, but his almost felt a bit more like a step back in time. Everybody else, I think they were a bit more era authentic.
Yeah.
But he was almost a bit of a step further back, and I don't know if it's because he's supposed to be a bit more of like an older generation scholar or kind of doctor. That's why. But I kind of felt like his dialogue was like when he was talking about his was some of the more like the better of the dialogue I felt within the film kind of thing. Yeah.
Because some of the lines he gets, like I've seen things that would make Sir Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb is a very good line.
It's a good little line, isn't it?
And perfectly perhaps by him. And certainly, when he has a scene later in the film when they go to try and kill Orlok.
Yeah.
And he has a scene where he kind of reveals that he knew what was happening all along kind of thing. And we get the sudden breakdown of insanity.
We get a bit of madness.
I mean, I was literally expecting him to burn to death at that point. I thought he was literally going full on, like, I'm just going to burn.
I'm just going for
like, that's how we're going. I thought we were getting that kind of level of, like, I'm God, but he did reappear.
Yeah. It's also quite a small cast, I'd say, of characters. You don't really, there's obviously quite a few surrounding characters, but I thought it was a bit small as well. So you have
you've got Nicholas Hoult.
What do you think of Nicholas Hoult?
I thought Nicholas, it's always an improvement on Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, but
it's slightly less wooden, but again, he was definitely one of the ones that prompted there's a little bit of a kind of a hammy acting going on here at times. Like, he was very good in he kind of went back and forth for me between like being very kind of like the obvious bumbling kind of person to the certain scenes felt a little bit like stronger with him. I had a vision midway through where I thought, I wonder what this would be like if we had the reunion of Robert Pattinson, because I don't know why, but I feel like he would have killed that role.
Yeah, I feel like he would.
It's weird for me to be saying that, like, Robert Pattinson, like, in this role, but he just,
brought it back. He's brought it around.
He has indeed. It's a weird, like, when you think that Robert Pattinson, you'll go to, but I don't know why. I just feel like he would have had that right. But then this is the thing with me where I felt this is across the board where I felt like it was constantly triggering a line between this kind of hammy kind of version of it and then this trying to be serious, and it was a back and forth whiplash for me that I felt was never finding a perfect balance. Some of the actors I felt like some scenes it was like, that's good, some scenes that just feels almost ridiculous of the levels of what we've got, especially say I think Lily Rose Depp, who I think in certain scenes is fantastic, and in certain scenes I was like, fucking hell, what? Well, what am I watching?
A lot of people have compared her performance to the woman. I don't have my laptop in front of me, so I can't research names, so I've just got to say the woman in Possession, which we did cover a couple of episodes ago. So
yes, I can see that kind of the level of the possession, and that adds a very interesting kind of aspect to the film. This kind of it's one of those things that early on we get, like the first scene in the film is almost the setup of all of this kind of trauma that she feels throughout the film, kind of thing, and that's really interesting. It's a reworking of the scene with the werewolf in Anna that is in the original book,
and the Francis Ford Coppola when he's
where we have a grotesque and slightly younger but more dysmorphed version of Orlok, where he's on top of her and she's
fucked in that one anyway.
Yeah,
he's pretty cooked.
He's fucked anyway, but he looked bigger and like bulkier and oddly like disformed in that first shot that we get of him. He doesn't look the same as the mustache wearing.
I think it's because
zombie that we get later.
I think it's because he just has the cloak for most of the film. You know?
I think for a lot of that we get, but that opening scene. So it's as I said, like her performance in terms of those, like the rhythm and the way that she kind of moves her body, I found very.
And all that,
I don't know for me if it's coming down again. So we just talked about the dialogue. I don't know if it's for me. It's coming down to some of the dialogue. That some of it just felt so like you're watching a period drama, which we are, but where the lines just for me just sometimes just felt very stale, very like they weren't kind of. They didn't feel natural at all. They felt very unnatural, some of the like dialogue that was coming out of their mouth. And some of the dialogue she was saying when she was having those moments of, oh, I'm looking off and I'm thinking and I'm talking and, oh, look, there's a bird in the tree or whatever it is. Yeah. It felt to me very stunted. It didn't feel like a natural dialogue. And I felt that not just with her dialogue, across like lots of the scenes where sometimes the dialogue was interesting and sometimes it almost felt like, I kind of preferred it when this was silent. I would have preferred it if you just be quiet.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Just stop.
Because I felt a lot of the times that when she was interacting with other, with other characters, I felt like that's when she was at her strongest and she had the bounce off with people, like the bounce off with Nicholas Hoult, the stuff with the few limited scenes she does get with Willem Dafoe, and then kind of later with Aaron Taylor-Johnson's wife. I kind of felt that a lot of the times when she had somebody to bounce off, it was a lot better.
She was better when it was someone that she could talk to in a lot of those scenes, and a lot of those more subdued scenes at times did work better. I just didn't feel that all of the possession scenes, and I felt the possession scenes also. After a while, I got a little bit kind of okay. Yeah, like this has now been a lot of this. And I'm getting a little bit kind of like, okay, it was impressive an hour ago, and now we're an hour, and we're near the end of the film, and I feel like we're still getting the same, the one that probably pops into my which was both impressive but both kind of like I'm a bit over this now, was the scene with Nicholas Hoult and her in the room when she does the weird vampire screaming, which has already been somewhat memed online of a kind of like this is one of the scenes that's been like the divisive scenes, and I was like the divisive scenes of lots of people being like, oh, that was eye-rollingly kind of like both had like elements of her body movements fantastic,
the one where
but her screaming and wailing and just sound
a cock in her tongue thing.
the
cock tongue,
and that kind of weird like the movement with her eyes rolling back and her eyes screaming and screeching there, and like it for me it crossed the boundary of being this scary possession and went into kind of ridiculous kind of. I was there like I felt like I should roll my eyes back in my head and be like, it's like that. Yeah. That was just one. It was just one of those bits when I just felt like I was like, I get kind of what we're trying to show and the trauma that we're trying to show through this character, and the fact of the past and how she's been drawn in previously, which is a new kind of idea that that Count Orlok, Nosferatu, Dracula, whatever we want to call, is like, has this way that he's been like, he's embedded himself into her long ago kind of thing. So whenever that was, because even the beginning when we get that scene, I was very much like, years later, I was like, what? Yeah. I thought it was more of a, we're going to find out later, and it was like years later. I was like, what the hell?
It's kind of like she was, I mean...
I was like, how do you two ever come together in this way? Like,
yeah, well, I guess it's like that weird thing of longing and just wanting someone and not wanting to be lonely and all of this.
Yeah.
And then somehow it's just linked them, and as she's gotten older and as she's discovered real love and that kind of stuff, it's put that away, and then he's got his fucking hooks back in her. And
that's what it is. Sold as this kind of first love, or the first person she wanted to. Even though if you look at him, if we see the way he looked back then, it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
I thought that would have made more sense if it was a scene when they showed him more as like an actual, like what he may have looked like if he was the handsomer version kind of thing.
Yeah,
like instead of the weird monster we get at the start of the film kind of thing, but. Like I understand that we've got the idea possibly that he was more of this different version that she was drawn to or taken in by, or that he is very much this predator that may have drawn her in. A bit of grooming going on there, as it always is with Dracula.
Yeah, he loves it. I guess the one we still got Renfield to talk about, or whatever they say. What were your thoughts on him?
So it's Orlok in this film. Orlok. Simon McBurney, and he was one of the ones that I really liked.
Okay.
I thought that he was very just in the level of insanity, which I think somewhat matched that kind of highness. There was a scene early on where I wasn't so sure about him, but as it went along, the first scene when we see him sat naked in the room, with his book between his legs, and in that kind of thing, and that kind of stuff, I was like, okay, we're really going for the hamminess here, aren't we? We're going to go in all in it. But when we got the scene with, say, the pigeon, I thought that was quite a cool scene.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I was actually massive on that portrayal of the character. I did like that.
I mean, he's not in it a huge amount.
No, but I did like that he was in it more than Tom Waits. Because I'm sure, I know we covered it recently, but I'm sure Tom Waits gets
he's in a couple of scenes.
He's in a couple of scenes, and I think he does the madness better, because Tom Waits is fucking insane, However, I liked that this Orlok had more scenes. So whilst I felt that I wasn't massive on the performance, I did enjoy that he was kind of dotted in and out more, and I also find that, and this is a spoiler for it, but when you watched the Francis Ford Coppola one, it always very much seemed that it was like this, Dracula wants to come to London. I haven't read the book, so I think I've done like half of it or something on an audio book. But Dracula wants to come to London. Let's just send our young chap to go there, and then when he's there, Dracula's like, "Oh, you're married. Let's have a look at your wife." And then he's like, "Oh, my love," rippled through time, and then he's like, "All right, I'm gonna start scheming." However, what I did like in this one is that you had the link between Count Orlok and Ellen already kind of established. And then and then you had Orlok was already under his thrall and wasn't quite a madman yet, and he sent Jonathan there. So it felt more like Jonathan has actually been set up from the start.
I liked that. I liked that. He is sent more on the duty kind of thing, and there is a overarching idea that Dracula has, and Dracula has more scheming that's going on behind this, but there is no link between Mina and in the actual story.
I can't remember.
There's no link there. It's something he's infatuated with her once he sees her. Basically, it's that kind of love at first sight that you get by the thing he's drawn in by. But no, I liked I did like that kind of part of the that we had that kind of link going, and I do think it made the Nicholas Holt's Thomas his character, which we're also saying Jonathan Harkin. I felt it did give him more of a purpose, because even in the book, to be honest, Jonathan Harkin is somewhat of a
he's a very passive
grating character in some ways. He's not always the most interesting character either. I felt it gave Nicholas Hoult a little bit more to do there, and as I said, even though I felt at times a little bit like that, I still think he was that hamminess. I still think he was had an interesting arc that he had to go through, and his scenes early on with when he has that trail. Although the journey there is not nearly as it makes it look like he takes the map.
Yeah.
He goes all the way up to the other side, which I thought was going to be like he's going to have to take a boat and he's going to have to get, like, let's look so far. But he kind of gets on a horse from town, and then he's suddenly like right there in the forest. But it doesn't feel like an edit that makes it feel like this was a long journey. It makes it feel like he's like he just went into that forest up there, and now he's like in this little thing, and he's like, I need to stop now. It's like, I feel like you just got on the horse.
Yeah,
and then he like stays, over, and we get the whole gypsies and
which is a cool
sacrificial.
Scene. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I really liked the in their sacrificial little scene that they're doing where they
find the
vampire, they kill the vampire and they put the stake for him, and you get that weird kind of oozy like practical effect of like the blood just like spurting up.
Yeah,
I thought that was a really cool little kind of shot, and we get a lot of those really interesting shots throughout the film, I think.
Oh yeah, I thought it was a beautiful looking film. You know, a lot of the shots were incredible.
I think there was a lot of beautiful, really good shots. I mean, the one of the hand going over the sea, I think was really impressive. Great. I think to be honest, the most interesting one, and this is one I think that was slightly Coppola stolen, was the use of the shadow.
Yeah,
it's used to an interesting effect here. And to be honest, for me personally, it was the part that made him scary in this film, was the shadows. I found the shadows more scary than seeing Orlok doing most of the film. That's what made it more interesting, was those shadow scenes. We get that early on in the very beginning scene where you see the shadow appear, but the wind is blowing. But the shadow is all that you're seeing. Yeah. And between it is nothingness. And those kind of shots were really good to kind of push on the thing, because I feel like it does sound like I'm being overly negative on this film. I try not to, because I kind of hate myself. Because before this film, I thought I was gonna. I didn't go in with like major high expectations because of the kind of film this is.
Yeah,
there's always the chance it goes that kind of one way or the other, where it's like it was interesting, but they didn't do this, or it was interesting that. So I was holding myself back somewhat, but I do think deep down there was a part of me that's thinking this is gonna be probably the best film of this. I thought this was gonna be like when it was originally going to be released on Christmas last year. I was like, this is probably gonna be my favorite film of the year. I'm so excited for this film. And then I kind of tempered as I'd seen more about it, and I think I'd kind of so I'm kind of hating myself that I don't like it as much as I thought I would. There were just too many things that just didn't draw me in at times, sadly. And that's one of the things. I'm just trying to justify the fact that yes, I may sound like a bitch, but I don't hate it. I don't hate this film.
Yeah,
I do think there's a lot to love and like about this film. It's just not like a 5-star film to me. That's all. I don't think that this is like a perfect version, and it's also not it's hard to remake Nosferatu because of what it is. It's a silent film with that has the basic outlines of a Dracula film. So to stay kind of somewhat like true to that kind of thing, and it takes certain like liberties with the materials here that like at times that make me kind of go away from that kind of original film and starts to feel maybe like it's not really even fully Nosferatu. It's kind of something else in that way. But as I said, there are so many, to go back to the shots, there are so many kind of really nice, beautiful shots in this film.
I mean, a lot of the shots that I kind of loved about it and had this real, like there were points where I had just like this real sense of dread throughout, and I really did feel that they kind of built into that with a lot of the ways in which they've set, made the sets look like his castle looks fucking derelict, looks cold, looks horrid.
Yeah. I liked the ruins. The fact that it's basically, that's what it is. It's
basically
ruins.
Whereas I kind of found that what this film leaned into was a lot more of like the surrealism, So there were scenes where, like when we first get to, Count Orlok's castle and we first meet him, there was just scenes where like Nicholas Holtz just 1 minute he's sat at the table and then the next he just shifted in front of the fireplace,
Yeah.
And it was all of these weird things of surrealism. The use of the shadows.
That was a shot in that scene when he's by the fire, which was again kind of one of those ones that might have seemed to some people might have seemed like, oh, like I understood that shot, why that sort of seemed a bit cheesy, because it was almost a direct version of a Nosferatu scene.
Yeah.
When he sees the Count Orlok standing there as he's like slowly approaching, and then it cuts to, you know, Thomas Hutter wailing. Like, that's why it kind of looks over the top, because it is kind of matching that over the topness. You know, so there is justification for the hamminess at times.
Yeah, that's one thing I found though, was like there was a real mix between the passiveness of Jonathan Harker in Francis Ford Coppola's, because he's quite a passive character until he's like. Until he sees a baby getting eaten, and then he's like, "Oh, maybe this guy isn't that nice. I need to go." And then the sheer kind of like almost hammy terror of like being in of John, whatever his name is, of Nicholas Hoult. You know, like it almost seems like he goes into the room with Count Orlok, and Count Orlok's like a strange old man, and he's talking about gypsy stuff, and then he shouts at him. And it's almost like as soon as he shouts, like Nicholas Holt's almost crying. And maybe that's just Nicholas Hoult is scared.
He's scared.
But he's really scared. And then in the kind of next scenes, he's almost stupidly terrified of the Count. And I feel like maybe they could have struck a bit more of it, because in the what I have listened to of the book is you do get this impression that, like, especially knowing where the story goes, you get the impression that Dracula is, to throw back to another OG vampire, you know, Barlow. Dracula is a step ahead. He's scheming, but he's also playing with his food a little bit. I listened to it on audiobook after the wedding, funnily enough, which is probably why, because then I got COVID, I never finished it. But I remember there was a really great scene where they're sat at like a fireplace, and I think they're having like a drink together, and they're talking about, you know, Count Dracula's history and his family, and how he's the last one, and how this is why he wants to move to London, and that kind of thing. And you almost get the impression that like Dracula isn't scary. He's just like, he's a bit of an eccentric old man. And then Jonathan Harker says something, and he kind of kicks off a little bit, but then he dies down, and you're like, he's just an old man who's been in a castle for years, you know. He's
pretty much straight away is just, you know, goes straight to that kind of like quite intense character straight away. You can almost tell why he's scared straight away, because he is that intense. I don't know if it's because it's, again, the Nosferatu not quite being exact anyway to the original story. Maybe. Where it's like in the original, like when he sees him, he's a scary, like he looks like a scary, you know. It's not so much that he's trying to like pretend that he's not this scary, like the Dracula that we get, who manipulates slowly. This is more of the creature. I think Nosferatu, I always think of just the creature.
More the creature, you know?
So I think that's what maybe the liberties are like hidden away. But that's the thing. This is why, like, with this story being done so many different times, the hard part is that it is hard not to read into those as well. I think, like, because you are a bit like,
it's a familiar
it almost
story.
Feels like straight away, like, because he goes straight in with that kind of attitude, that it makes it hard to feel like there's not a lot to grow here. He basically is he's the pissed off ex.
Yeah.
Who's like, so you're the new boyfriend, are you?
And you've already established it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
where do we go?
So you're there. It's like it feels, and I guess that's why this doesn't maybe last as long as it does in the original story of the other Dracula, because there's not that long like. He's slowly getting worse and worse. We do see obviously him. He's been bitten in the night. Yeah. He's having, you know, the dreams and stuff like that. But it does feel somewhat sped through this kind of part. It feels like we kind of go, yeah, he's getting this. He's finally decided to fight up to him. Whereas in say the other film or the novel, like of Dracula, it's much more of a slow kind of how I'm still stuck here. Why am I? Why is this still happening to me? How can I get away from him? He won't let me leave. You know, we've got all that. Whereas this one is pretty much kind of like we get like, you know, a little while of them going back and forth. He finishes the duty. It feels like it's only taking place across like a day or so.
It's a couple of days, must be.
He does the signing, and then he still says he's got to stay for another night, and then, you know, and then we have like, it doesn't take long for him to finally break out of his dream about like the fact that he seems to be going for Ellen, and he gets this idea in his head after he takes the locket. and then finally it's like I'm gonna bash him.
Yeah. What did you like going to Orlok? What did you think of him and the use of him and that kind of stuff?
I mean, this, to be honest, is the biggest sticking point for Nosferatu. You have an original film where the creature is scary and looks scary and doesn't have to do a lot and doesn't have to say much and doesn't need to talk a lot. Which I think, even if you're adapting it, for me personally, I feel like he needed to shut up a bit.
Oh, interesting.
I felt like he talked too much. I didn't mind the look of him.
Yeah.
I couldn't get this ringing out of my ear with the voice. I just found it I liked the wheezing, that kind of odd that he's like breaking down.
Yeah.
But this is the hard thing when you do that kind of accent, and it's the same accent pretty much, to be fair, that Gary Oldman did.
Yeah,
but
we know.
I thought that. I thought that was better. I like Gary Oldman in that part of the film. I'm not so keen on him later in the film
when he's hanging on.
But even Gary Oldman's felt like it had more of a thing. Whereas I gotta be honest, this voice was just ringing in my head like it was like that episode of Always Sunny when they're doing the the board game. I'm blanking on
Charlie McDennis.
Charlie McDennis. But the second one, when they have the guy who's apparently like the board thing, and they all have to do different accents. And at one point, one's doing like the Philly accent, and one then does the Russian accent. He's like, "Oh, this lady is very nice," like kind of thing. Like it's not that level, but it's. There was a point in my head when my head kind of rang and went, "It's nice."
Yeah, you went a bit Borat.
I went Borat in my head, and I was like, because his voice just I didn't find, this is my main stickling point, to be honest with it, is the fact that what I said about the shadows. I found the shadows and stuff scary. At times he was intimidating, but mainly when he was doing mainly horrific things. When he's drinking and feeding and things like that, I found that quite cool. The bleeding of them, the way he was like a literal leech, sucking in his body. Like when you see that
kind of
first
sexual
scene
as well. He's getting the hips.
He makes them have that. Yeah, he makes them have that. And again, that's very much in the source material. This kind of idea of this almost weirdly orgasmic nature of it, kind of thing. So yeah, I really liked those things, but it just was every time he was just there, stood there talking to characters. It's just when I kind of just felt like, I don't find you scary. I find
really
your presence in other scenes scary. I feel the shadows, the scenes of you in the shadows, in the distance, away. I find that scary. And that's kind of what is very much a lot of the original Nosferatu. He's not always centre stage and right in the front. He is very much in the shadows, in this lurking presence. And I just he took me out of it.
And that's interesting because I think that where my problems come with the film, or where my satisfaction with it dips a little bit, and you mentioned going in with your expectations. I kind of went in with like no expectations really. I heard it was good. I like Robert Eggers' films. I'd forgotten just how close it was to the Dracula story. So I don't think I went in expecting it to be a completely fresh film, but I was surprised by how close it was. Just for some reason I didn't put two and two together. And I think maybe just it being Christmas, New Year, and then going back to work, I just don't think I had any time to really build expectations. So I went in and I'm pleasantly surprised with how much I really enjoyed the film. But for me, it's when it got to the third act, which we'll touch on a little. That's when my kind of satisfaction went a little bit. But I thought that like when I really liked Orlok's voice. I liked the weirdness of it. I think that Bill Skarsgard's taken on two kind of iconic characters, Pennywise and now Count Orlok, and both of them, had very original, iconic, like portrayals of them, So I kind of thought that he brought something new to the role. I really liked the voice. I liked the look of him. I was thinking, when he gets to London, are we going to see handsome Bill Skarsgård? But then I'm pleased that they kept him, and I'm pleased that they kept him as being quite monstrous.
I'm glad they didn't show handsome Bill Skarsgård, because for me personally, it's not such a thing. I don't think he's an extremely attractive person. He's now muscled himself up, and some people probably absolutely love it. But I just don't feel like even like Gary Oldman, but Gary Oldman had that charm that he looked like that kind of thing in the same way, but it's not quite the same thing.
It's not. Well, it's the guy from Saltburn. I can never pronounce his last name. Barry Keoghan or whatever his name is. There's a hot debate about whether he's hot or not. I think he's not.
I mean, I agree at the same time, but there's I don't know. There's a different intensity with them. There's something weirdly squirmy, nerdy that I find about Bill Skarsgård.
But I thought that Count Orlok was great. I thought that I worried that they would use him too much, and I thought
they did.
I don't know. I think maybe third act they used him too much. Whereas I kind of feel like when he was in the first act when when Nicholas Holt's in the castle. And you see the first introduction where he's kind of obscured and he's out of focus in a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, I loved.
I thought that was great.
All of the parts when he was obscured and in the distance and there, I felt he was scared. That's what I felt like when he was at those parts. I thought that's great. That's what I'm hoping he keeps being.
And when he was, like when you saw him feed, like you were saying, there was a great scene on the Demeter, which I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, but.
Yeah, again, it all felt like that was, again, it felt like some of these parts. And again, it's not meant to be Dracula, but that's the thing. If you're going to lean in and then go Dracula, then maybe go for it.
Maybe, yeah.
Instead of doing, we're just going to,
let's just rewrite it.
It's not the thing. I really like the fact that they've taken the slight idea that was in the thing of the plague.
I was going to mention.
I really like the plague. I really thought that was cool.
The
scenery setting of the plague.
The fact that when once he arrives, there's a shit ton of fucking rats everywhere, and I was about to say London, but Bisping or whatever is just.
It's all those things I would have liked like that again. Like some of these things I just would like Demeter and the idea of the plague, it being more of a plague spreading than necessarily just him eating them. I would have liked more of that. I would have also liked to build that world a little bit more of like. How's it affecting the city? Because we got like shots, and I loved the shots when it was like they're going along in the carriage, and you can see dead bodies just lying in the streets,
up.
like people just
taking
there,
coffins everywhere.
Well, not even just like, and it wasn't just that; it was the fact that there's just like basically where it looks like someone's literally just dropped down dead in the street.
Yeah, loads of them.
I really liked that kind of like. Presence. It's one of those where I was just like, I like some of this stuff. I like the way you built the towns and the things like that. And I guess I would like just there, like it's almost like I want to see a little bit more of the characters going out of their little bubbles and getting into a little bit more of this kind of world that you tend to see in some of the other ones where it talks about like things that happen in the city or people they interact in. But as you said, this is quite contained in their little bubble of basically like. Aaron Taylor Johnson's house, the Frederick Harding, his and his wife Anna's like little house kind of thing. A lot of it's either contained in that house or in obviously after the castle or kind of going to the doctor's,
little hovel.
If in an Innies or whatever it is.
Oh, the asylum.
Ianson.
He was
Ralph,
good, man.
sorry, Ianson.
Ralph Inson.
He's good. I like him because
he's a
he
solid
was the
actor.
character. He's
Chris
a solid
Finch.
actor, but he's also one of the only ones that felt like he slightly felt like he was in a more serious film than some of the others at times.
A little, yeah.
He felt like he was playing very much a straight man to other people's kind of like. He just felt at times I was like, you seem like you're in more of like you seem like you're just playing this straight.
Yeah, maybe
other people feel like they're going like I'm in this period piece. I must.
Ham it a bit.
Ham it, and I must talk, and I must pronounce it.
Maybe, yeah. Whereas he was a bit
more just like
more straight line.
He's a solid little character actor, though. Isn't he?
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like the main stuff for me or the main faults of it, should I say, just came down pretty much to the ending. That's where I feel like it was overall. I feel like it was a great film. I really liked. How they used Count Orlok. I wasn't sure how they were going to do it. I was worried that they were doing too much, but for me, he was pretty. He was great. I feel like I said, once it gets to the point where he's in. I keep wanting to say he's in London and he's in Carfax Abbey, but when he's in his destination and he's in his new house, I almost feel like he appears and he mentions about having the 3 nights. But his scenes start to get a little bit longer. He starts to get a little bit less obscured by the shadows. And for me, like it's that thing of once you see it, once you see it enough.
This is just why I think seeing him isn't the problem. This is why I felt that it was the talking. He talked just too much for the cat. And I know the original Dracula is, but the Count Orlok in Nosferatu does not. And I think that's
silent.
But it's a creature. No, but they have subtitles. But what I mean is that to me it's almost like it is a silent film, yes, but there is kind of but it is like almost a defining of like, it's not that I don't want him to talk at all. I don't want him to be silent, but it's more of the fact that when you have like the opening when he's speaking in his native tongue, that's good. I wish they'd stuck with him, to be honest, in native tongue. Yeah. Like, or something like that. But just less of the conversation. He doesn't need to stand there and to tell me all about what is now going to happen and what is going to go on and then across these 3 nights, which again felt a bit sped through of these 3 nights. It didn't feel like they spent the time to build the dread of what these 3 nights will be, apart from it was only Aaron Taylor-Johnson's, because it mainly just affects him.
Oh yeah, to be fair, he got fucked over.
He just gets fucked over.
What did he do?
They talk about that. It's just
he just took them in.
Yeah, he took them in and he just gets completely fucked up. That's what I mean. I'm a bit like,
we're going to
3 nights of pain to her, but yeah, okay, but really it doesn't, like, he doesn't kill, because I thought, to be honest, early in the film, I thought they were going to skew expectations. I legitimately thought that they were going to kill Thomas Hutter, Nicholas Holt's character. I thought it felt, because it got so quick and because he literally, like, it's more obscured in Dracula and stuff like that about him actually trying to attack Dracula or kill Dracula so much. Whereas here, it's pretty much straight out, I'm going to kill you.
I'm going to pump you.
And it felt very much to me like it was like, here's going to be the differences, because I felt that we were skewing more towards the female perspective here. So I thought we're going to off what was kind of the male kind of protagonist.
The male gaze.
Not that it's not. Mina isn't in the Dracula novel and is actually, for the most part, is still a main character within that story. That's just why I thought it was going to go. So I thought we were eschewing that kind of by killing him off kind of thing. But then again, later on, nothing even happens to him later. So it's like their family, well, theirs is destroyed by the end. Yeah. But to a certain point, it's like, you guys are fine. It's just this guy who loses his daughters and his wife and his other child to be.
His unborn child.
He probably kills himself. I'm surprised they didn't include a dog that he loves that gets absolutely mutilated. Or
he had the cat.
Here's my cat. Here's all my cats, and then all the cats are dead. You know what I mean? It's just like, fuck this guy.
Fuck this guy in particular.
The guy that's actually extremely nice to Nicholas Holt's character and takes her in even though she's fucking insane.
Yeah.
And really, seriously, how many of you... I wouldn't keep her around my fucking kids.
And I
you know what I mean? I wouldn't keep her in the house anymore.
Nicholas Holt isn't paying for those doctors.
Exactly, you know what I mean? And yeah, Nicholas Holt is not even like... He's the more well-off friend who you always expect to be somewhat sold as the smug kind of asshole.
Yeah.
But he's actually not. He comes across quite, all right in that. I can't say... Like, just talking of Aaron Taylor-Johnson, I can't say that he pulls off all of the dramatic scenes perfectly.
No.
I am questioning like a lot of people said, he's the next James Bond, and I'm questioning whether actually he's got the chops to pull off some of these roles that he's meant to be up for.
I could see it as James Bond, to be honest.
I mean, I can see it. I'm just...
James Bond doesn't really act much, let's be honest.
No, but I've seen him recently in a few roles, and he just doesn't seem to be... I haven't seen that one.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, but... I'm not sure if he's fully got the chops for all of these roles at times.
I was watching and I was like, does he, like, is it the fact that he doesn't fully have the chops, or is it the fact that he's in a room with Willem Dafoe, Ralph Ederson and Nicholas Holt?
I think, but that's the thing, you know what I mean? But that's the thing. I mean, he's the same age, isn't it? He's been in the industry just like Nicholas Holt, to be fair. Like, they're both grown up from kids. I think, like, if he ain't got the chop, he's not quite that level of... Again, like, it's a little bit of a kind of... I look at him and again go... We probably could have upscaled the acting.
Yeah, maybe.
And I'm not going to guess, because I actually like him as an actor. There were just scenes again where it's just like, I feel like you're just not quite strong enough to pull off some of this stuff.
Maybe, yeah.
But
I don't disagree.
The character himself, I thought
He's
kind of got shit
over, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I felt like actually it deserved, and
I didn't
I liked his
ending
well. And stuff like that with his wife.
Any of it?
No,
you know,
he fought it the whole time.
He was like, no. There's no demon. There's nothing like this.
Yeah,
I'll boot you out. So you could have just been like, I'll leave them. I'll go and get the ones who actually believe this and who are trying it. The Doctor, Ralph Fiennes, he walks away scot-free.
Yeah, he didn't.
Nothing fucking happened to him, you know?
No, he's fine. And to be fair, when Ralph Fiennes is actually normally you'd expect him to die. It's quite common for him to die in a film. Yeah,
you know.
So no, like most of these characters do get fucked over in a lot of different ways. I mean, to be fair, Lena Rose Depp mainly just gets fucked.
And that's how you have to end the Nosferatu curse.
By him having a pounding kind of thing. It's an interesting take on the ending. It's not at all the ending I expected it to go towards.
And I have two kind of points around it. I feel like thematically, I'm sure there's probably some kind of, you know,
that it's her story.
That it's her story, and she
started
has to be
by
the
getting
one.
Pounded. She ends by getting
she started with pipe. She has to end it with pipe,
and she's coming from that first pipe in the whole film.
She loved it. So I'm sure, like thematically, if you look at it like this is probably going to sound weird, but I'm just spitballing. You know, if you look at it thematically and you're thinking, well, maybe it's about this trauma, and it's about longing, and it's about wanting, and the only way in which you can end that is you have to take action and you have to take responsibility for it, or you have to be the one to challenge it and to take it on. So, because ultimately, what the men do is pointless.
So they're saying that at the beginning that almost, and she says that she seeked it originally. So she seeks this originally. So she's brought this upon them. So it's almost her, like, that she has to go through. She's lived with him all this time. So you can absolutely see why she's the one that should be almost the one to take him.
Yeah. So you can see it. I'm sure if there's probably people who have the view of looking at it in like it's set during whatever the 19th century, 18th century. Women are oppressed as hell. And this is about sexual release and sexual repression and all of that stuff. And maybe it's that thing of like, well, actually, you're getting that freedom and you're getting that release and you're getting what you want. Maybe that's a way of looking at it as well. Yeah. So thematically,
I don't think anyone wants that power.
I don't think anybody wants that power from this shriveled old creature. So maybe thematically it makes sense, but almost just as like an audience member and just as watching it. I don't know if I completely feel like it kind of wrapped up the story. I don't know how I felt about the ending. I didn't want it to be like it was like a Marvel different. Ending where they have a massive fight. I did like.
No, it wasn't that. I mean, I guess because if you know the story, then your expectation is that they are going to go and try to kill him. Yeah. I mean, there's always an oddly, like, when it was just like, we finally found him and now we're going to put a stake through his heart. It was always a bit of okay. Like, that also feels a bit anticlimactic.
Yes.
So I get the skewing away from it and it being with this. I don't know. I just don't know if, like, this whole... It just felt this whole, like, I don't know, killing through the whole of the sexual nature... And the fact that he's distracted because she allows the sexual nature of the, sucking her blood until sunrise and distracts him from knowing it. But I don't know if it just feels like all of that. Is it because it feels like Nosferatu, like, although he got to do a lot of parts within the film, that he somewhat doesn't feel like he gets to fully fulfill a kind of, like, major kind of arc towards the end, that it kind of just comes this kind of, shit, you fooled me.
Oh,
I'm dead.
Yeah, I'm fucked. But, I mean, in the end...
I expected them to burn together, to be honest. I thought it was going to burst into flames. I thought they were going to burn on the bed, or so that's when they were going to come back in as they're, like, burning.
Yeah.
That kind of... Like, I felt like I was expect that visual. Because I don't really like the whole... Like, as much as I like the bleeding eyes and all this cool, that felt anticlimactic to me. I've got to be honest, the whole... the sun. My face is... And then I liked the weird skinny-legged body, arms and legs that he suddenly shrinks down to.
Yeah.
It's a weird final, like, image of having that beautiful, almost, like, midsummerish kind of shot of, like, look at the beautiful,
Look at them intertwined.
Yeah, look at
forevermore.
This love as it is forever, this weird kind of twisted, love that is kind of there. But I don't know. Yeah, it's just... It just didn't fully that's completely... And
felt a little lackluster.
You're kind of like watching there and then you're like waiting and you're almost waiting a moment longer than I expected as you're like, okay, it feels like it's going to stop here with William Dafoe and you're seeing William Dafoe's face in the mirror. That reflection where you've just got his face looking out, and then you're like, but then it lingers for even longer, but I couldn't quite see the reasoning.
No.
And then it's like, oh, okay, that is it.
Yeah.
That's part of it, but again, so that's the ending just felt a little, it felt a little lacking. Like there could have been more ways to have her have this moment while also still, I don't know, allowing Orlok to have saying it's this weird, like the original Nosferatu does very much play sometimes into this kind of love that is wanted and this kind of somewhat controlling of Count Orlok kind of onto Ellen in the original short silent film. So that's interesting to lean more heavily into that kind of part of it again, because even Nicholas Holt's characters in like more whatever Thomas Hutter in the original kind of thing is still going to plays to a certain part, but then it is very much comes on this love, this watching, this after her kind of thing. I'm all related. So leading it around that seemed to work, perfectly well within that. I don't know if it's just the you've got the sexual themes that play throughout it, and you've got the the possession almost seems that this is very much of a controlling nature that he's given upon her. So you get these kind of those kind of parts in kind of there that kind of lead, and you have those nice scenes as if it's like a controlling over her and that she's completely gone. You've got the William Dafoe when he shoves the thing through her arm. Yeah. And just to be like, she is completely gone. We had to prove it this way. Yeah. We were going through that. So that's all. It's all like that kind of interesting. I don't know if it's just for me that I don't know if they needed to. I didn't feel like it needed to go as fully into that as I would have more of the distance and the watching, controlling the original kind of the silent kind of took it in a more of a controlling / kind of I'm kind of here, I'm kind of watching you, I'm a presence, but I don't need to fully possess you, and then the only way to break out of that is for Nicholas Hoult to give you meh sex. But you're acting like amazing, but really we know you're just thinking about Count Orlok's dick the whole time.
It's shriveled little winky.
That kind of a whole that sex scene that I'm not sure that anyone necessarily needed.
I don't know. I think it's the ending for me, and it's almost like I kind of get thematically what they were going for. It just almost feels kind of slightly lackluster, and I'm not. I said I'm not expecting some kind of big like Marvel action film where they have a massive fight at Carfax Abbey. I'm not expecting that. I feel like I don't know. I feel like they maybe got a little bit boxed in by thinking, well, how can we kind of end this? Because
keeping the creature and
given what we've got, I don't know what I think would have been a better ending, but I feel like they could have been something.
It's not that it was better. It's not that it could like be better. I don't know. For me, to be honest, it just plays from the whole of the Count Orlok that I just outside of the mysterious parts of him, which are played very well. The actual presence of him is what for me feels somewhat underwhelming. He's just I didn't feel the intimidating presence I expected to feel. Maybe it's because he comes straight in and being the second he talks, he's being this kind of he's very off-puttish kind of intense thing that it never feels like I get the allure of what I feel like I should get from this character, somewhat kind of thing, that I should get either that or I should get either the more creepy hidden away kind of character. So it's not that it's not different, and it's absolutely, and it's not anything against the performance of Bill Skarsgård. There's certainly a fit. There's interesting ways. I know lots of people. There's a divisiveness about the way he looks and the mustache ridden. To be honest, it's nothing to do with his face actually that I dislike. It's the weird fact that I felt like looking at him, it looked, the body and the stuff around him looked very like practical effecty, but not in like a great way for me. Like the way his body looked, it looked very plasticky for me at times, and it looked a bit, off when I can see the lumps and the scars, but it just didn't look fully like all the time like it was like a perfectly presented piece. It looked very like it didn't look fully or almost like flesh to me all the time. It looked kind of plasticine-y to me at times. That was a look of it at times. It just kind of. And I guess it does deviate, obviously, quite a bit from the original look of the. A lot of people, I guess, would have been expecting and that's fine with me. The way his face looks, they're expecting that big-eared rat, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I thought I quite liked the way he looked. I thought that having this like waxiness to his body kind of worked in the fact that he is this undead creature. He's not really human. A lot of the times, I felt that he was actually really obscured by shadow. So even when there were scenes where he was talking to people and it was a little bit later, you couldn't really quite make out his face fully. He was still a little bit obscured. I don't know whether it was just, if they did any CGI or anything.
I mean, a lot of what he's got going around him, it's hard at times to get a full look of what that hair looks like, that weird kind of
I thought he was bald for a
little hairline.
And
then one part I thought it was just, is that just Bill Skarsgård hair?
Is that just Bill Skarsgård hair?
Is that just his hair? Like they've just built around the face and just kept his hair like that?
Well, I thought he was bald for a long time.
Yeah,
so I couldn't see it, and then there was a scene
in the shadow. Obviously, it looks like, because in the early shadows he looks more classic Orlok. It looks like he's got the ears, and it looks like it's a bald head. It's more as you see him, you see more hairs and parts like that. Like he's balding, but not bald.
Balding. I mean, do you have any? I feel like we've kind of got to the point where we've covered the good, we've covered the bad. Is there anything you want to do before we wrap up?
I'm afraid.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Like it, as I said, it's just it's not that I was like, oh my god, I'm sat here and I'm bored.
Yeah.
But there just was something in the just generally that just made me not drawn in by it. So when I felt like it was getting to a certain point and we were kind of still covering some of the same bases of the possession and the things like that, it just, when the film just started to lose a little bit like within me kind of thing. I don't know if it was, that I wasn't fully into the, Ellen Hutter, the Lily Rose Depp's kind of like at all times. I wasn't fully into her performance all the time throughout the whole film, and I was a bit kind of thrown off by that. And then, I was enjoying Count Orlok as, when we had these really interesting visuals of the shadows and him in the distance, but then I felt like I was getting taken out of the scenes when he was talking.
Yeah.
So it's those things. I don't know. There's something that just didn't mould with me. That just didn't. Where at times I was just a little bit like, okay. I got to a point when I was a bit like, I'm still not finding what's really fully enjoyable about some of this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what's put it more in the middle. And I expect it. I did think it might be a little bit more brought up there. And it's just as a fair. I don't know. I just had little niggles, and it's one I'll rewatch and see if I can more. Maybe after a second watch, I'll be more like,
if you know what you expect.
We'll know what I'm expecting. It might kind of clear up for me. There were, as I've mentioned, there were just things where there were visuals that I really loved, and even in that actually, even in the visuals, there were visuals I really loved, and then there were some that were more CGI than I expected.
Okay.
There was some really, and there was one where they went along a canal where you had a shot, and I was like, "Fuck, that was bad CGI."
You really, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. I was taken out by the fact that Robert Eggers always felt like a very natural filmmaker to me. Very natural visuals, very thing. Wouldn't go so much into that kind of realm of like over the top with the CGI, but there was lots of scenes where I felt like this of this film and his last film, that the CGI, maybe I haven't seen Northman, so I don't know how much is in that, but it definitely felt more visually obvious to me that some of that was not as natural as I felt like I expected him to be, maybe as a director. That it'd be a bit more natural. That's not me saying across the whole film. There were lots of beautiful shots and lots of beautiful scenery, but I was just surprised at some of those. And as we delved on that before, like the surrealist, I liked those little bits of surrealism. I did with Robert Eggers expect more surrealism.
Yeah, I expected
most more ambiguous ideas than, oh no, this is in your... And that's the thing with Orlok. It's the fact that Robert Eggers' Orlok I expected to be very ambiguous and very kind of surrealist and very odd in that way, and not so so here's my plan.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Here's my plan.
Like that's kind of that. I think that actually was the thing that bugged me. Robert, it's not the expectation of that or Bill Skarsgård or anyone else or what I expected of the film. I think I had expectations of Robert Egger to make a slightly different film maybe than what we got. This feels more straightforwardly Dracula, except for the female kind of wavelength that runs throughout it than I maybe expected.
It's really interesting you mention about the surrealism. I know we got to the point where we're going to wrap up, so maybe we'll do this.
It's fine, we go
off. Yeah, we always do. But that's actually, I hadn't noticed it until you mentioned that, and I wonder whether this is a design choice. Like, you're right, the Lighthouse had a lot of surrealism in it. I saw The Witch once many years ago, but I do remember elements of it, and it feels like there was a lot of surrealism, and that's when we were first watching the first act in particular. I was thinking Francis Ford Coppola has leaned into the romance, the kind of the melodramatic part of this story, and it's a very grandiose. If you listen to the soundtrack, it's orchestral.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's fucking. There's more ham than fucking gammon on there. There's so much kind of this grandioseness to it. Whereas I was thinking and it struck in my head particularly the scene where Nicholas Hoult has kind of stepped off that rickety bridge and he's got to a point where there's like a crossroad, and this is where in the Coppola one, this is where Dracula comes under the guise of the carriage driver. And he picks him up, and then he takes him, and you hear the wolves outside. In this one, you get the carriage come down, and then you get like these weird shots, and then suddenly the carriage is sideways, and the door opens, but nobody's driving it. Then when he gets,
it's an interesting shot.
And then when he gets to the castle, there's all of this surrealism. It's all this weird stuff, and I don't know whether that's a design choice of. We're in Count Orlok's domain, and it is supposed to be that. But I definitely agree. It kind of once we get to Germany, once we get out of the castle, the surrealism does start to fade away. It's only something I only just noticed.
Yeah, but it isn't just like. But the thing is, like, what they set up here felt so much like it's weird. I feel like I wanted more of the visuals of the lighthouse in this version, because the possession and things like that, we get the shaking with blood, and we get the fit, but those feel for possession things actually feel more what you'd expect
a
from
bit
a possession,
a
bit standard. Whereas I was expecting more odd imagery, really like this feels a little bit more like Robert Eggers is trying to be slightly more mainstream, and I should hold back because this is a film that can, after my last film flopped, this is the film that could put me back up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I can't go if I go too lighthousey with this, they'll be like, I can't have William Dafoe whacking off in the corner. You know what I mean? Like, I can't have him, but I can't have weird visuals of like angels or rocks falling upon me or like I'm naked in the... But... you could say, there are scenes where she's like lying naked, and there are scenes like where she's like basically being raped mentally, and like all those things. It's like, but I feel like the way that he takes it is slightly more standard. Than I maybe expected him to have more insane visuals of like, and again, another way like that Orlok almost could have been shown through those kind of weird, insane overlap, really interesting multiple kind of thing. But that's just it. I guess that's the Robert Eggers part that kind of just clicked in my head, is the fact that I think he played it safer than I expected.
Yeah, interesting.
Just for that kind of thing. I guess that's why I was excited for Robert Eggers to do it, because I wanted. And I guess this is maybe I've only seen The Lighthouse, to be fair, so that's maybe why I've built an expectation around what he kind of was.
It's an interesting.
But I still don't go away, because I still think in general film terms that there are some scenes that are very stunted in terms of the dialogue and things like that. So I do think some of the performances are not pitch perfect either all the time in this film. So that I still think in general film terms there are still problems. But there are also I did say there are some very good stylistic choices. And very good performances that are still there. And overall, it is still like an enjoyable and interesting adaptation. It's always interesting to see new versions of what it is. I guess I was just hoping that one day I will get whatever version of Dracula I want in my head.
One day. I mean, for me to kind of summarise, I definitely think I definitely think I was more of a fan than you. Like, I think it's a great film. I think it's it's beautifully shot. It has a really great kind of sense of dread throughout it. I was a massive fan of how they used Orlok. I really like the way in which like this sense of dread just follows him, and when he does arrive in the city, you feel him and the atmosphere changes. I like that Nicholas Hoult going there was set up a little bit more.
Yeah.
It always felt, I didn't like how passive Jonathan Harker is. I still think that he's a bit too, this new Nicholas Hoult is a bit too kind of afraid off the bat, but
this new Nicholas
Hoult,
just Nicholas Hoult himself.
Nicholas Hoult himself.
We need to get rid of this new Lex Luthor Nicholas Hoult
and just keep him as this. I feel like that was maybe a bit too much too soon. But generally speaking, I feel like the first kind of definitely the first 2 acts and maybe the first part of Act 3 are really strong. I agree. Sometimes there's a little bit of a tonal shift between how the actors are, but I feel for the most part it kind of treads the line well. And I think a majority of the performances are pretty good. I definitely recommend people going to check it out.
Yeah,
I have more faith not to get some preconceived notions of the film we're going to be doing next. I have more faith in this than I do in The Wolfman. We watched the trailer for The Wolfman for this, and I think it looked. I
had more faith going into this than The Wolfman, which I'm not. So I'm not I think there could be some really interesting ideas, but right now I'm like. But it could also be like looks like it's going to be good, but then it could end up being like
that, you forget it.
That was it. Yeah, it's like not Strangers Chapter 1.
No, I'm
talking like that. Like that actually, like it seems like the elements are there, but when you put it all together, it's like, well, that was kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, that was underwhelming.
And it's being released in January.
Yeah, which we
not for this one, but Christmas Day in America. That's good, but when you release ones in January, you're always a bit like,
you don't have faith in that.
You have faith in this film because they haven't marketed it much either.
They've marketed it horribly here, from what I've heard.
But come back,
and with that, remember to hit that subscribe button and please leave us a lovely review. If you were a fan of Nosferatu, come and let us know your thoughts. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Is it a yes for Ratu or is it a no for Ratu? I kind of did it all right there. Usually I fuck that up.
To be fair, I literally part of my brain was fit, and my brain midway through went, I wonder if they'll leave this on like a he's still alive. He actually survives. This time,
maybe.
Like that. Nosferatu 2. Electric Boogaloo 2.
I was expecting like a Marvel kind of thing at the end,
I was expecting a post-credit scene.
Yeah, every film should have a post-credit scene where they tease the sequel.
They tease the next one, and this was just like that. This should have got, he's going to survive, and he's going to do Nosferatu 2. Nosferatu 2.
Yeah. All right, awesome. See you next week. Take care. If you have any dreams about strange creatures coming to you and piping you whilst you sleep, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Leave it for years, and it's only trauma that's going to resurface in the most horrible ways. We'll see you soon.
More endings than Return of the King.